but it became a thing where I just really felt a connection to it. And it was this thing I've always wanted to do my entire life. And now I'm doing it.
Hello and welcome to Where the Living Room Used to Be, a podcast about Rhode Island's music scene. Hey everyone, it's James. My guest on this episode is hip-hop artist, producer, and prolific beatmaker Lewis Morris. During our interview, we talk about how his move from poetry to rap came about. We also got into his experience recording at B08 Studios here in Pawtucket for his latest album, Don't Be Nice, which came out earlier this year and is fantastic. Plus, we cover the list of collaborations he's built over the years and just kind of get into the therapeutic value of music. So, I'm such a big fan of everything that Lewis does, and this was a real fun conversation to have with him. I hope you all like it too. If you do, please leave a rating or a review wherever you're listening right now. It really does help a lot, and enjoy.
Yeah, I grew up on the south side of Providence, with like short little excursions in East Providence and down south. But most of my time has been spent, south side Providence. Grew up in a very poor, very religious household. So my mom was Pentecostal Christian. We went to a church called the Shiloh Gospel Temple that was housed in the big giant Methodist church on the Providence-Cranston city line. And most of my exposure to music was gospel music. So that's mostly what I grew up listening to as a kid, because my mom wouldn't allow me to listen to stuff that had a bunch of cussing in it, or rap or anything like that. So it's Jesus, But when I went to my dad's over the weekend, it was a very different thing where he was listening to a lot of funk music, Parliament Funkadelic, George Clinton, or he was listening to a bunch of jazz. So a lot of John Coltrane, a lot of Cannonball Adderley, a lot of Branford Marsalis, all that good jazz. And so that was like most of my musical diet growing up. And I didn't really get a real introduction to rap until I got this game for the Nintendo GameCube called Dave Mara Freestyle BMX 2. And it had a song by Gangstar called Moment of Truth.
Yeah, all right.
I remembered listening to it while playing, and I felt like I couldn't even pay attention to doing like all the crazy moves and all that, because I was just too busy just listening to this song, and it felt like for the first time a song was talking directly to me and speaking to me and the things that mattered to me. And that was a wild feeling. So from that point on, it became sort of a thing where I just wanted to explore, hip hop and all of its history and what I had been missing by not listening to it, because prior to that point, I had really no exposure to the inner workings of the culture and the genre outside of, things that were already popular, or things that I would listen to on the bus to school, So that was the start of it. So it was so you could say it was an interesting balanced diet of food that I think if you listen to my music now, you can hear the pieces of all of that. In that, the gospel and the jazz and the funk and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah, okay. And like roughly what year was that you started to get into hip hop?
Well, I was 11 at the time, 11 or 12. And I think that was probably, want to say like 2002.
Okay.
Around 2000, 2001 or 2002. It was around.
Yeah. Okay.
It was around then.
Yeah. All right. And then, what was that next step then? So, I mean, you heard Gangstar. Were you just trying to find a lot more hip hop of that style, I guess, or that era? Because 2002 was not, the big stuff coming out at that time was not Gangstar,
Oh no.
So, but so were you kind of going back to like more 80s, 90s hip hop and starting to uncover that stuff?
Well, at the time, there wasn't a lot of easy ways to search up.
Yeah, okay.
To search up things. So you end up discovering things and then you try and dive into it as much as you can. So what I did was there used to be this service that Yahoo had called Yahoo Music Videos, where you could just watch music videos on like a playlist. So a lot of time was spent just watching different music videos, and a lot of it was just, what was on the radio at the time.
Yeah.
Popular things, like, 50 or the big one I think that I watched a lot was this horrible LL Cool J song called Love You Better. It's really bad. But, of all the, mainstream sort of stuff that was out at the time, I think I gravitated to a particular set of sounds, a particular kind of song,
Okay.
Songs that usually have, very prominent, that doesn't try to hide its sampling,
Yep.
Songs that are kind of rough around the edges in terms of how they approach the sampling.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff like that. I remember one song I listened to a lot was this R&B track called Why Don't We Fall in Love by Amory. And there's this beautiful, beautiful production that so clearly sounds like it's honoring the thing that it's sampling by not trying to hide it under layers of other noises,
Yeah, yeah.
And that's just something I really respect. And, those years, it was really hard to dive into, things that you heard because you would hear them, but you wouldn't know the name of it. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have it in my head, but I don't know what it is. And then years later, you discover what it is, and it just blows your mind. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of brings to mind, like going back and you were listening to some funk and jazz. Were you kind of breaking that stuff down, like even earlier? Because it's, I guess it just, why I'm bringing that up is I remember listening to the radio and like thinking about drums when I was probably like 8 or something like that, like listening to like Lionel Richie and being like, oh man, dancing on the ceiling. Like I like this beat and like, this is what's kind of going on. And I wasn't necessarily putting it together, but when I started playing, I was like, oh, I was just being more analytical about like music before I even kind of knew it. Like, is that something that's, maybe true?
Yeah, definitely. I remember, like I used to have like, I developed like this weird, like sort of writing language of how I would make drum patterns, right?
Yeah.
So it would be like kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick, 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 snare, all that stuff. And a lot of it was just me listening to drum beats I like and songs I like, and then trying to replicate them on a page,
Okay.
So yeah, I did a lot of that, and there were songs I gravitated towards for specific reasons, but I just didn't have the vocabulary to understand why I gravitated towards those songs. Maybe it was a string section in the middle, or maybe it was some trumpets, maybe it was a saxophone hanging in the background. It's a lot of that, and I didn't really have the sort of vocabulary or know-how to know what those things were.
Yeah.
When I was like around that same time, I remember I asked my dad for a keyboard, right? Like a Yamaha keyboard. And I played around with that thing forever of just going through like the presets and listening to all the beats from that and trying to make songs that way.
Oh, okay.
And all that. So I didn't have necessarily the vocabulary or know-how or anything to approach really creating music, and I wouldn't get that stuff for a long time still. So, but it was the start, was just listening to those things and trying to sort of, in my own janky 12-year-old brain, reverse engineer how those things came to be. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, cool. I mean, you just mentioned this this keyboard. Was that actually your intro to music? Like, were you first making beats, or were you doing poetry first, or like, what was your first kind of artistic endeavor?
So it was always poetry first.
Oh, okay.
You know? I started writing poetry at around that same time. I remember the first poem I wrote was this one I wrote in the middle of church, right? And the preacher was preaching and he was doing his message, and I usually used to be very attentive during those things, but I just kept having these series of words in my head that just kept repeating and I couldn't pay attention. Mm-hmm. So I just ended up writing it down. But I didn't have paper, so I just had a napkin and a pen and a seat next to me that were those really uncomfortable metal chairs that just kills your back, right? and it had like ornamental design, so it had holes in it. So me trying to write was just me poking holes and all that. It was bad, but I did write a poem. I wrote a poem that had 16 lines, and it was all that. And obviously, when you're that age, you start feeling things, and you don't understand until you get older. Oh, wait, that's depression.
Yeah.
And I remember taking that poem and bringing it to English class and reading it because my teacher, for her, that I told my teacher, hey, I wrote a poem, and she's like, oh, cool. Do you want to read it in front of the class? And not thinking, I was like, yeah. And I read it, and my teacher became very concerned. And then the next day, I came in, the school psychiatrist intercepted me at the door and was like, hey, you want to talk?
So, why?
Yeah, but it was the first time that I felt like someone listened to me and took my words seriously. So poetry became the thing after that. And I wrote poetry pretty regularly from that point on. And music wasn't really, like, making music seriously wasn't really in my radar until I got much older. So yeah.
Okay. And when did that start then? When did you start making music?
Well, that that started when I was in college.
Okay.
And I took a class called Beat Research, which was all about the history of electronic music, from hip hop to techno to house, dubstep, all of that. Yeah. And a part of that class was learning how to use beat making software. So at that time, it was just like, oh my God, I get to do the things I've listened to other people do,
Yeah.
Because at that time I was really into, DJ Premier, Ninth Wonder, Alchemist, Pete Rock, Watch Professor, like I wasn't about the rappers. I was about the beats, the production and all that. And the guys I admire were those guys. Mm-hmm. And
those are good guys.
Yeah, right?
It's a good list.
Yeah. So I sort of dove into that and got hooked immediately and started, making beats like a madman. Most of them were bad back then, but it became a thing where I just really felt a connection to it. And it was this thing I've always wanted to do my entire life. And now I'm doing it.
Like, so you've been doing poetry for quite a while, started making beats from this class. Were you like, I'm going to make beats for myself and start rapping? Or were you just like, was it still kind of separate?
Yeah. So my philosophy back then, and, it kind of mirrors my philosophy now, is, making beats and writing poetry, or writing raps, are sometimes intertwined, but most of the time not. And at that time, I wasn't really thinking about rapping, because, poetry was still like the number one thing. And I just didn't think about putting what I do with poetry to beats, because I think my approach to writing poetry isn't really conducive to writing raps,
Yeah.
I'm very, because I have this bad habit where I tend to edit before I even put something down on the page, and it's bad. And a lot of times I'll laboriously go over a line in my head, and judging by the audience of people in my brain, it either goes on a page or it doesn't. And I think with writing raps, it requires a more free mindset that isn't so dominated by the need to, perfectly sculpt every line.
Okay.
And so that was the reason why I sort of kept them separate for a very long time. And it just got to a point where I just looked at all these beats that I had. Some of them were good. Some of them were, whatever. And I was just like, they're just going to stay beats unless I do something with them. And not really knowing anything at the time, I tried to connect with, like local independent MCs like Dutch Rebel, and was like, hey, I have beats. And, and she was like, send them to me. And I sent her a bunch that I thought were like great. And obviously I didn't hear back from her, but that was because, I didn't develop the sound yet. I was still copying the stuff I liked, I was still copying, Primo and Alchemist and all those guys. So at that point I decided, hey, why don't I just try writing a song? And I wrote one song, just one. And I wrote it and I memorized it, and it came time for like a school function as part of my major, and I was asked to perform, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try doing this rap song. And I did, and I didn't hate it, and it kind of felt good to be up there. It kind of felt good to be rapping my words, and that kind of made me think, hey, I should try doing this. And of course, me not knowing how to take things slow, I was like, I'm gonna make an album.
Well, what was that song? What was the first song that you did?
The first song that I did was it's on the first album I did. It's a song called Dog, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And with bad recording quality and all that. It's still up. And it just became this thing where I listened to it and I showed it to people, and all of a sudden they were like, yo, you got something here. You can do this. You can really do this. And it didn't really hit me that way until the song, through no trying of my own, was featured on Boston Hassel's website as a check this out, this new guy feature. And and it became a thing where it was like, okay, I think I can do this. And it became the dominant thing over the course of years, where poetry is not really a thing I'm doing that much anymore, and rap is. So
So when you were making these early beats, like what what were you using? Do you remember the programs and stuff like that? Or were you using drum machines? Were you using a mixture of stuff? Like, how were you creating things?
Yeah, I've pretty much my entire career have been exclusively all about Ableton.
Okay.
So Ableton Live. And most of what I did was, in software, so I didn't have like a physical, drum machine or anything like that. I actually haven't really done the drum machine thing until very recently. My first piece of equipment that I bought for myself was an MPK. That had like the keyboard and the drum pad.
Yeah.
And eventually I, graduated to a slightly larger MPK. And just this year, I bought my first MPC. I've been using that MPC a lot to make beats. Actually, a lot of the beats on Don't Be Nice were made with that MPC. So
cool.
It's different. It's way different because the processes you have to think in steps when it comes to the MPC. Whereas if a part isn't working, then I'll shelve it for now, and then I'll work on this other part.
I got you.
You can't really do that with the MPC. You kind of have to map out where you're going in advance, which is a very different thing. A very different sort of process, and it's making me rethink how I put together my beats. So, yeah.
That seems still pretty cool, though, to just keep advancing in that way and, pushing yourself. Did you complete that first record as you had plans, or how long did it take from that first song to the record? We're just eating the whole apple in one bite, or like?
Yeah, it didn't take that long actually.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it was recorded with like a snowball mic. Actually, my first few albums were recorded with that same snowball mic.
Okay.
And like this, rinky-dink recording studio on Mass Arts campus. And so from that track's release, I think that was 2012, like midway 2012. Like, I want to say it was like towards the summer of 2012 was when that song was finished.
Yeah.
And from then to the next year, to next summer, that album was out.
Yeah. Okay.
And so a lot of it was just, like it's the Book of Rhymes album, it's everything you think you've ever wanted to say on record. And of course, a lot of it wasn't good, but whatever. It was a lot of the things I believed and a lot of the things I wanted to say on the record. It was that album. And
okay.
Yeah, so it wasn't that long. Probably should have been longer, but whatever.
And which album is this? Ampersand? Is that the first record?
No, the first album is called Dope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Ampersand was actually that next year. So
okay.
Dope was 2013. Ampersand was 2014. I still have a fondness for Ampersand though, because I feel like a lot of my approach with that album informed my approach on the latest one that I just put out.
Okay, like in what way?
Yeah, it was very collaborative, and
okay,
I just had a lot of fun, writing it. A lot of fun making the beats. A lot of fun, just being in a studio with people as they were adding their parts, and And I wasn't thinking too hard about like making it like this grand statement. Like the albums that sort of came after Ampersand, I kind of felt like were these labored attempts to be like meaningful and important. And for a lot of it, it just didn't feel fun, And that's not to say those albums are bad or anything. It just didn't I didn't have that same sort of positive energy throughout its entire creation. Whereas with Ampersand, that positive energy was throughout because I surrounded myself with people that supported my sound and supported what I was trying to do. And all of that good stuff. And that was something I wanted to sort of replicate and uh, and find again for Don't Be Nice. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, listening to a lot of your stuff, and I mean, you can share whatever you want to share, but it seems that your music is quite deeply personal. That it's not only even just the stuff that's going on around you, which is, pretty connected to just hip hop music in general. But like, it seems like just some more personal things.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because I didn't, a lot of like the personal stuff, talking about, my life or, social economic status, like I get a job or, mental health things or other stuff like that. That's a more recent development because a lot of my music a couple of years back, I wanted to try and avoid myself to create like this larger than life version of myself. And it wasn't until I had a sort of personal crisis towards the end of 2016 going into 2017 where just every bad thing that could happen did happen, and it was entirely my fault. And it just became this thing where I realized I had been avoiding myself and my music, and that had to change. So I created the album Alive, right? Yeah. As an attempt to sort of flush out this toxicity from out of my system, and to also face myself directly for the first time about the smoke and mirrors. Which is why if you go to that album Bandcamp, I think the cover is just my face. And I did that intentionally because I had never featured my face prominently on any of my album covers. So anytime I wanted to listen to it, I had to face me,
I'm always running from epiphanies, or whatever the universe wants to give to me. I always dodge it. No, I ain't so proud to admit to this logic. Guess hard to do like the sixes and just trust the process. To think I'm an artist, all I do is rhyme my feelings at a microphone. Oversharing through a crowd of bunches makes me feel at home. Wading through the shards of everything that I've broken. Whatever truth is dormant and my soul has been spoken. So love at first sight never applied to my reflection. A teardrop accompanied this lesson. Left with all the questions that are linger for forever. If I'm ever too willing to split, I'll meet a me that's deader than pods. I'm more distant than God, sick of mourning who I used to be. All this inner scrutiny attached to my flaws, so I smash my old mirrors. Went out to find some new ones, but searching ever since. Yeah, been searching ever since.
So yeah, a lot of my content now is sort of explorations of who I am, whether that means celebrating that or criticizing that or holding myself accountable. It's all I view it as me trying to sort of understand myself, trying to walk through these dark corridors that are covered in cobwebs and dust. And trying to find myself in those corridors, and that's something I've never really done before. And I think of it as, therapy in that sense, just trying to understand myself. And I think that was the whole purpose behind the creation of some of my more recent projects was just trying to see myself in the most honest, most empathetic, but yet most, holding myself accountable way possible. And it sort of birthed into the songs on Don't Be Nice, where, 1 second I'm talking about my mental health, another I'm talking about my inability to get a job, or my inability to, sustain healthy relationships or things like that. Like all of that stuff is just, I lay it out bare, and that's something I haven't done previously. So yeah, that's been sort of my approach to making songs and writing lyrics. Is honest? Is it exploring a side of me that hasn't been explored before by me or by the people listening to my music? Is this going to help the people that listen to it explore parts of their lives too? It's me considering all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as a fan of what you do, I appreciate that. And I definitely have, I've listened to Don't Be Nice a ton. I've listened to a lot of your earlier stuff as well, but I've been really digging that new record. And anyone that's listening to this podcast that hasn't checked out Don't Be Nice, like, do it. It's an amazing record. And, hopefully you'll have a similar experience of connecting with it. If you've had any like struggles in your life or whatever else it is, you should probably be able to kind of connect with this. But yeah, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what your writing process is like, or what it was even for this newest record, if you want to be more specific to that? Like, how do you know what beats you're going to use? How do you, and I guess we'll cover that in a little bit as well, but you are an extremely prolific beat maker, like it is, I tried to count, but I cannot count how many like beats you put out that are just on your own page. And then, we'll definitely talk about a lot of the artists that you've worked with, but when you're making these things, are you like, this is for me, this is going on my next record, and then writing the lyrics to it then, or like, how does that process work for you?
That's a good question, because like, I'll be honest with you, right? Like, there are times when an artist wants a beat and I feel a connection to it, and I'm like, well, bills, right? And I sell that beat, and they take that beat and make something amazing with it, and I'm intensely jealous that I didn't keep it for myself. It's happened a lot of times, but I mean, it's a hard thing to nail down, but you just know when you make something, when you make a beat and you can't get it out of your head, you can kind of hear it when you're not listening to it, Yeah. You go to sleep hearing it. You wake up hearing it, and you just kind of know when it's going to be something that you'll want to use. Mm-hmm. And it's not a feeling that I can, really articulate in that way. I feel like with, Don't Be Nice, for example, there were a couple of joints on that where I just thought about, the sort of sounds that I gravitate towards, and just knowing what kind of sounds those are going to be. Like, I remember when I made the beat for pre-post-apocalyptic music, the opening track, and those strings, that string section, the nice chunky bass line, how clean it is, how easy it is to loop, and all that. I remember making it and just in my head, just knowing that it's gonna be something that I'm gonna use.
Yeah, okay.
And I remember even while making it, I thought of that pre-post-apocalyptic music. I thought about that sort of cadence as I was making it. And usually when that happens, I just know that it's mine, and I just don't tell anybody about it. So they hear it. Other times it's ones that require the most work, the ones that take the longest to sort of see through and realize it and all that. Like, the other one like that was Chasing Echoes. Where that took forever. And it was, 5 different samples, all of which I tried sampling previously in the past, but just couldn't make any of them work individually. So it became this thing where just the amount of work that went into it was just made me think, I'm going to want to keep this and I'm going to want to make something meaningful out of it. But yeah, it's a hard thing to tell. But you just know.
It's a little bit like kind of a gut feeling. You're like, this one is gonna. You just connect with it a little bit more at times.
Exactly.
Yo, listen. Yo, listen. Left on will it take a right on till a crack alley garbage pail nigga cussing like a sailor. Don't ask where I'm from if you don't want the answer. Don't inhale the smoke if you can't live with the cancer. Providence in my veins when pesticides to my brain catch me greening for the dirty brown water up my sink. 11 busted KB gaze at the gray sky. Feels like I've never seen the fucking sun. Day flies like I swim in the molasses. City air contaminated with the anti-disasters. Can't predict the weather, Tony, but Tracker couldn't forecast it. But let them know the havoc. 11 way from I recognize and that's a casket. Set my dose, lemonade and wins cause it's bitter. Fancy myself a renegade, you know better nigga. I left this fucking city 10 years of resistance just to come back to a guess. That makes me a quitter, right?
The apple never falls too far from the tree. And it really does. And the fruit that it won't one day be the seed. It ain't no secret that these roots run deep. So my heart has a home while my mind runs free.
The writing process is I always start with the beat first. I almost never write a track without a beat. So usually I make the beat, listen to it, and the ideas that come from that kind of flow from where the beat takes me.
Okay.
And I almost never go into writing a song with like a particular subject matter in mind. I listen to what the beat inspires within me, and a lot of times that's just something that I get from just listening to it. So the Chasing Echoes beat, for example, I instantly thought about Providence when I listened to it, and it was like, okay, so this is going to be a dedication to Providence.
Yeah.
So that's the direction I put that song. So, every song requires something different, but you just sort of listen to it, listen to the vibe. It sort of inspires within you, and then you just write and see where it takes you. And sometimes it'll take you to some pretty interesting places. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good segue because you have a beat tape called Smash. That's a dedication to Providence. How did you know that this particular beat is for, this neighborhood or, the East Side or something like that, or for was it just something that you were feeling like this beat kind of reminds you of a certain part of the States? So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that particular project that you worked on.
That's a deep cut, though.
Hey, you said you listened to the podcast. I dig.
Yeah, so. I know you did the digging. It's interesting, because at that point I wasn't living in Providence, and I really missed the city. I really missed living in Providence, and I really missed being there. Because at that point, I hadn't been there in legit years. And I remember when I went back, I think it was for like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something along those lines. And I remember just walking around and just everything was different, like new buildings just erupted out of nowhere.
Yeah.
To the mall, and there's like stores I've never heard of. And, walk downtown and Kennedy Plaza looks totally different. It's still gross, but it looked totally different. And, I just wanted to make sort of a dedication to what I remember of, the parts of the city that I'm most fond of. So I just thought of like the vibes I got from just being in Providence. Like if I had the album in front of me and I saw the track list,
Yeah.
Like certain songs give off certain moods, because
Well, I got one because I live in Mount Pleasant, and I think the title is like, "What's that smell?" or something like that. So I wanted to ask: is that a positive thing or a negative thing? Are you saying that people that live in Mount Pleasant smell, or is it like the bakeries we have here, or what? What were you talking about in that? Non-lyric based music that you're putting out,
I was thinking about Mount Pleasant High.
Okay.
Yeah, the high school, because I remember I would go there a couple of times for like they used to have like basketball teams, but they weren't really competitive,
Okay.
It's just sort of, this weird non-competitive basketball tournament where everybody sucks and no one can shoot.
Man, I wish I knew about that one. I probably could have competed in it, but
yeah. I just remember walking down the halls and just thinking, wow, it really stinks. It really stinks in here. And I just like when I was titling it, I just thought of what's that smell, and I thought of the title before I thought of the neighborhood.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
When it came time to put that on my beat tape, it's like, what neighborhood? And it's sort of what that smell, and then I connected that to the high school, and then bam, there you go.
Nice.
So, no offense to anyone who lives in Mount Pleasant.
All right. Well, I'll tell all my neighbors that we're cool.
Yeah, no beef. No beef.
But that's something that I will think about anytime I drive by there or run by there or whatever. So, Cool. Yeah. I mean, I guess kind of staying with some of the beats, like who are some of the people that you've worked with and done production for? I'm sure it's a long list, but, and more specific, Rhode Island artists. Anybody you want to shout out or?
Oh, yeah. I have some pretty frequent collaborators. The one that springs to mind first off is Jesse the Tree. He's been, a big supporter of mine, has used my beats prominently in a lot of different projects. I think his latest joint that came out, I think it was like Space Tomatoes or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like 4 beats from me. And
you have a killer verse on one of the songs too, by the way. It's one of my favorites.
I really love that verse. I was so proud of it, but I was also a little bit upset that I didn't save it for my album.
Yeah,
because I'm competitive, damn it. Drent also, I'm a frequent collaborator with. He really likes my production, and we work together a lot. And I know he's cooking a bunch of stuff up with some beats. Like we've been talking about doing a project together. So that's something that's happening. And also Sly Quixote. I think we're doing a project together. Like he has a bunch of my beats, and I think he's just going to put something out with all that. And recently, Toad from Toad and the Stooligans released a solo project called A Reptile Dysfunction, which is entirely produced by me. And that was a really cool thing to see, just because, that group has been doing big things, and the new project is fucking awesome. I love it. And yeah, it's just really cool to see all these, sort of wildly varied and unique artists taking a chance on my beats, and it's just really cool. It's just really cool to see, especially considering that first email I sent to Dutch Rebel that never got answered.
Yeah.
But outside of Providence, I think like the most frequent collaborator I work with is an MC from JP by way of Sacramento. His name is Paul Willis. And we got introduced very randomly by a friend. And he said, okay, I'm going to need 14 beats from you. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I gave him 14 beats, and then he makes this amazing album out of it. And since then, we've been pretty frequent collaborators, working like, I give him beats. He raps over them, and it always comes out great. Or he adds guest verses to my projects. I think up until Don't Be Nice, he's had a guest verse on pretty much all of my projects. So it's been a really cool thing to see.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you're always open to talking to new people, working with new people. So if anyone likes your beats, reach out to Lewis and try to support him that way as well, So cool. I've had some people on that have worked at B08 Studios in Pawtucket, but I've never talked to anyone about it in more detail. So I figured I'd take an opportunity. I know that you just did the latest record there. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? And
B08 was the missing link that I didn't know was missing. Okay. And it's really interesting because I did most of album creating prior to Don't Be Nice pretty much on my own in that same rinky-dink studio at Mass Art. And when it came time to do Don't Be Nice, I decided I want to use a studio, and I want to use a studio with people I can trust, with people who are going to enhance my sound, what my sound is, and just understand what I'm trying to do. And I remember being in the studio with Jesse to record that verse from Space Tomatoes, and just seeing the way he worked with him, the way he worked with me, just how he just gives all of himself. Talking about Sean. The way that he sort of gives so much of himself to the artists that he works with in the studio just made me think, I want to have that guy in my corner with me creating these songs. And just like I thought, he just brings so much, not just, creative energy, but also sort of artistic know-how, like you can tell him like the kind of mood you're going for on a song, and he just knows how to do it, and I don't, always have like the terminology, to understand the things that he's doing, but he just knows how to do it, and just supports my sound, supports the art, and it was just a really, really cool thing to be in that studio. And to also have other people in the studio, to record their verses, like Godzilla On A Leash, for example. Yeah. I had no intention of writing to that beat until Drent started writing to it, and then Sean started writing to it, and then it's like, well, okay, shit. Well, I'm gonna have to write to it too. And all three of us are writing to the beat, and and that's what Godzilla On A Leash became, and I've never had an experience like that in my entire life of just creating something so quickly on the fly in like a matter of an hour. And, B08 and Sean just facilitates that so effortlessly. So, shout out to B08, shout out to SeanDizzyBlade. the album would not be the album without those guys.
Yeah. Well, that's probably my favorite song on the record. So there's a lot of great tracks on there, but that one, stands out. So it's interesting to kind of hear. And I guess sometimes when it hits, And cool. But yeah, I guess that kind of brings up. So like, how did that even kind of come about? Like, did they just drop the beat on and like, if it wasn't something that you were planning on using, how did it even get into their sphere, so to say? Like, was it just, are you just like showing up at the studio and like, here's my hard drive of beats, let's kind of scroll through the folders and see what kind of works, or do you already have stuff kind of planned out in some of those?
I remember, I try to have a plan because, sometimes people just go to the studio, don't know what they're doing, and then just, spend their money just not knowing what they're going to do. It's like, you're paying your money for your hours in there. You should have a plan.
Yeah.
So I try as much as I can to have a plan. And when I made that beat, I knew I wanted it to be on the album. And, it had a different name and a different concept and all that. And it just wasn't hitting. And I couldn't get anything down on page. And I played the beat for Sean. And he's like, do you have an idea for this? And I'm like, no, not really. But we listened to it, and I just thought of, the image of Godzilla on a leash, like having this monster, this giant monster that can level entire cities, just held back from doing that.
Yeah.
And how it feels sort of like that to be an artist, of just like, you are this person who can do amazing things, but you're just, something's holding you back and you don't know what it is,
Yeah.
So I explained that concept to him, and he was like, I think you have a strong enough concept to write a song. So maybe we just listen to it and you can do some writing. And I did. Drent showed up because he heard that I was in the studio, and he just wants to be in the studio, which is cool, So I start writing my verse, and the first line that came to me was sort of an interpolation of I don't know if you're familiar with Onyx, the rap group.
Oh yeah, of course.
Their second project, All We Got Is Us. The title track includes, the niggas is heartless, you ain't heartless, you don't want no part in this, you ain't got it in you, And I just thought of that, and I thought it would be so dope to take those lines and sort of reinterpret them in a way, because he's talking about how dangerous it is to be where he's from and to live his life. And for me, I'm talking about how dangerous I feel, but I can't be because of something that's holding me back. And it was this weird thing where I just remembered writing it, and Sean was like, "Is it okay if I write for this too?" And I was like, "Yeah, definitely." And he starts writing, and then Drent just starts writing. He didn't even ask me for permission. And in about 45 minutes, we had a song. And I went in there, laid down my verse. Sean laid down his verse. Drent laid down his verse in that order. And that's the order of theirs on the album. So, it was legit an experience I've never had working on a song ever. Just having nothing and then having a banger. So, yeah.
You don't really want no part in this. You ain't got it in ya. I was born to be a zilla. Level your fucking city just for fun, get the picture. All of them come
I guess with that as well. So I mean, you worked with some other people. Do you like, as you're writing songs, do you think of certain people that you want to also like feature on a song? You know, so like Get a Job has Slitty on it. You know, Jesse's on a couple of tracks. Are you like, when you're writing those songs, you're like, I think Jesse would be perfect to have a verse on this, or to kind of be a part of it, or does it come about in a different way?
Well, it depends on a song.
Okay.
So for like Diagnosis, for example, Jesse I had in mind from the beginning. But for the other track, Jesse was brought on to sort of bring an element to the track that I thought was lacking for the other track they featured on. Other times it's just a matter of like, I have an idea of who I want to be on it, but that person falls through. So I see who else would like to be on it, and that person adds something that I think the previous person wouldn't have added. So there was supposed to be an entirely different artist on, like, for example, Chasing Echoes. Was supposed to be sort of a female vocalist. And that sort of fell through. It fell through twice with two different female vocalists. And by the time I thought of, like, you know what, maybe I'm going about this wrong. Maybe I should get, you know, sort of like smooth, sultry male vocals and see how that works. And I got Sly Quixote on it, and it just clicked like that. But you know, other times, like for like Ribeye, for example, I knew right when I made the beat, right when I wrote the verse, that I wanted Brandy Blaze on it. And it was a year-long campaign to get her to spit a verse on it. And I didn't have another option. I just knew I wanted her, and if it didn't have her, then I wouldn't put the song on the project.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
When I asked Brandy, I was expecting a no, completely, or just a flat no. You know, because I don't like to, you know, beg for features, and I especially don't like to, you know, bother artists who are usually bothered by, you know, like dude MCs that are super misogynist and all that. And it just, I was a little afraid to approach Brandy, and I asked her, you know, I really respect your work, and I think what you do is great, and I love your latest project, and I have this track, and I would love for you to be part of it. And she said yes, and I was just surprised that she said yes. And it was so cool because she brought something to that track that I just think, you know, if it was someone else, it wouldn't be as good. And she just brings it she brings the energy full circle. And you just have those hunches about, you know, who's going to be featured on it from the beginning. And those are one of those hunches. That was one of those times where I was adamant about a particular artist being on the song. And I think that was one of the only times I was that adamant about it. Was Brandy Blaze and maybe Slitty on Get a Job. Those were the two that I definitely needed to have on the project. So yeah.
Slitty does have a way of telling us to get a fucking job. Someone else saying that, I don't think it would ring the same way, you know? So, so I know when this record came out, you know, you did sort of like a live stream album release, which was cool. I got to check some of that out. But before the pandemic, where were you doing shows a lot? Like, what was even kind of early on, like when you like first kind of cutting your teeth as a rapper? Do you remember some of the shows you were doing and some of the people that you were performing with, and kind of who was in your circle?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of stuff at DIY venues up here in Boston. So places like the White House, Neverland House, Monkey Palace. There's a bunch of places.
Yeah, okay.
A bunch of, you know, like sort of basement venues and things like that. And through that, I kind of met a lot of different people. a lot of different artists. Like usually, back at that time, anytime I was asked to do a show, it was usually an electronic show where there's like lots of weirdo shit with with guitar pedals and wah wah pedals and shit like that.
Yeah.
That stuff is cool. It just wasn't what I was doing. And I remember every time I was the only black person on the bill and I was the only rapper on the bill. So, It was like for a lot of these people, this is going to be the first time they've seen a rapper on stage. So I got to bring it every time. And it was that way for a while. Of just, doing a lot of basement shows and all that. Now, at the same time I was doing the poetry thing, and with poetry it was entirely different. Because I was sort of making a name for myself in that arena and performing at prominent venues, doing TED Talks, performing at colleges, things like that. And with rap it was an entirely different thing where I was in basements and DIY venues. Not a lot of the shit I was doing at that point was official. So yeah, it was different. Now up in Providence, a lot of the venues were News Cafe, Ears to 20, psychic readings, things like that. More official stages or spot that used to be open. I'm forgetting the name of it. Aurora.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Rest in peace. But yeah, it was. So it was a lot of small venues and things like that, which I kind of prefer. But I don't know, man. Something about being in that basement, next to the washing machines was my favorite place to perform.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Well, the last question I have for you, Lewis, is what would you say is your greatest music accomplishment?
Well, I'll say this. The final track on Don't Be Nice features my favorite verse I've ever written. And it's my favorite verse because I wrote it on a car ride on the way to the studio to record that song. And I just didn't have time to edit it. I didn't have time to, think about it. I didn't have time to do that edit before I write thing that I always do. So it was just 100% raw. And I remember just writing it and writing the final lines. I think it was something along the lines of, thinking back to graduation day, mom sitting in the back, tears and blazing on her face, feeling I'm so proud of you. I can hear it from the stage. That feeling is the one I'm forever destined to chase. And it sums up so much of the emotionality of the album, of everything I was feeling at that time, of this struggle for years to get back to who I am as an artist, who I am as a human, to a more healthy, more fulfilling place. And that line, I think, those lines distill that struggle. And it just and it hit me on the car ride there. It's like, this is it. This is what I've been trying to write my entire life as an MC. Was this verse, and I kind of don't know what to do now that I've written this verse. So once the song was recorded, and I put it together, because I knew when I made the beat, I wanted to put it on the album and I wanted it to be the final track. And from the conception of it all the way to the writing of that final verse, it just sticks with me more than any other song that I've ever made. Just the entire creation of it and listening to it for the first time when it was first recorded, showing it to people for the first time, performing it for the first time. The first time I ever performed it was at Dorchester Art Project. And I remember just seeing people in tears after the song was done. And that's, just something I hold with me every day, that like people felt that, and people felt that because I didn't have that opportunity to second guess myself, to think, oh, do I want to write this, And yeah, it was that. I think it's that. I think that for me was the moment, was like sort of like the Moby Dick moment for me. Just like, this is it. This is what I've been trying to do forever. So yeah.
Yeah, I dig it, man. And it's been truly incredible to talk to you and get a little bit of insight into your creative process and, the career that you put together. It's, again, I'll say that, I'm just a big fan of what you do. It's astounding how much creative material you put out, and also such a short amount of time. And, I'm happy to be a small part and kind of just sharing your story, man. So thank you so much, Lewis.
Thank you for having me, for real. This podcast is so cool, and the way you sort of explore each side of the artist you interview is a really cool thing, and I'm just really glad that I get to be on it. So cool. Thank you so much. It's been really cool to sort of go back and see where everything started for me as an artist. So thank you.
No walking, no talking. Drag my apocalypse behind my back, awkward. Must be why I got a hunchback like Uncle Fester. Do a million by making everything a test run.
I'm a mess of useless facts and raps I never write. Don't success us ballin', but I ain't got any checks to write. I carry cars that I get swiped to make my problems vanish. So everything I do is canon. Get rap, comma standing, yeah, I still don't got the answers. I probably never will, and I gotta be okay with that shit. A bitter pill, if I'm honest. My written word will probably be a mixtape, so it don't really count if you don't bump this at my weight, nigga. When everything is fake, I realize what I aim to give you. Bury my diary, one day it might be structure. I wrote this while my girl was sleeping. On the if the bass from my headphones creeping to the dreams. Now she's singing melodies like it's a mantra. Yo, now she's humming melodies like it's a mantra. I wrote this while my girl was sleeping. On the if the bass from my headphones creeping to the dreams. Now she's humming melodies like it's a mantra. Yo, now she's humming melodies like it's a mantra. Lost in the quiet, found in the chaos. Looking at the mirror is like performing a seance. Communicating with parts thought to be dead and buried forever. Chasing memory, just another method of resurrection. That's why I treat every song I write as if it's precious. Multiple X's etched into a treasure map. No edits to this journey, love. Look for the embers, that's how you know it's me. Confused cause a devil and angel on my shoulders both agree. My mind's a painting and a museum that's inflamed just beauty, but it also comes with the chance to get a mean. Expression becomes a hazard. No one is in this game, can't tell you who the fuck to root for. I'm the only one that's playing, so what's the point, nigga? What you know about stalemates? Progression at the speed of a snail's pace. That's how I find myself at just frail states. Feels like I run hard, exhausted with the knowledge that I still haven't come far. Barely moving anywhere, like I'm trapped on a fun wire. Skipping down the road with my past and my future as different balls and chains attached to my legs, so I only move glacially through the present. Catch my brain flashing back to 07, high school graduation day. Mom sitting in the back, tears are blazing on her face, yelling, I'm so proud of you. I can hear her from the stage. That feeling is the one I'm forever guessing to chase. I wrote this while my girl was sleeping. On the if the bass from my headphones creeping to the dreams. Now she's humming melodies like it's a mantra. Yo, now she's humming